You might enjoy this. I'm about to talk politics. Well, firstly, I'm going to talk about the Labour Party. Then I'm going to talk about the Union.
Nice.
And the church.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Peace be with you, by the way.
Yeah, you too. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to do a talk later on or something.
Yeah. If you want to, that'd be great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We'll do.
Okay. So, JC.
Recording now.
Is the camera? Okay.
Checking the audio.
Are we good? Your battery all right?
Battery okay.
Ready to start?
Praise the Lord.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about the recent elections and why the Labour Party is collapsing in the UK, and particularly in the north of England, where working class communities are increasingly rejecting the Labour Party. And I'm going to give it as points, and if you've got questions to help you, all you need to do is remember the number of what I say if you want to ask a question about that point at the end of the talk. The 6 points I'm going to talk about as to why the Labour Party is collapsing in England and the UK, but also what the Labour Party can do about it to regain the initiative. Because I come from one of those working class communities that will never vote for the Tory party. Because my working class community was destroyed by Thatcherite politics. But luckily for me, when it comes to election times, I have alternatives. The Christian People's Alliance, UKIP, the Brexit Party, the Reform Party. And what do these things have in common? They talk about socially conservative issues. Point number one as to why the Labour Party has collapsed in England is because when the working classes of the north of England wanted to talk about the north-south divide, about immigration, and about the pride of British identity, the Labour Party wanted to talk about Black Lives Matter, the LGBTQ ideology, and they wanted to talk about Islamophobia. The Labour Party is talking about issues that are irrelevant to the concerns of the working classes in the north of England. So why should the working classes in the north of England vote for the Labour Party when you aren't talking about the same things that the working class families are talking about across their dining room tables? Why should the working class of the north of England vote for a party that has elected a terrorist sympathiser as their leader? Jeremy Corbyn called Hezbollah friends. Jeremy Corbyn and the shadow chancellor talked about the dignity of the cause of the IRA, speaking about them in laudable terms. These are terrorist organisations despised by the working class in the north of England. Many of the working class families of the north of England have given their sons and daughters to the British Army, and many of those sons and daughters died at the hands of the IRA. Why would a working class family vote for a Labour Party that elects as its leaders those that support the murderers of its sons and daughters? Those same Labourites, those same Islington Mafia types, patronise and demean the white working class, particularly for its patriotism and its sense of identity, looking down upon them for flying the flag, calling them Little Englanders. Why would group of people want to vote for a party that looks down its nose and dismisses working class communities as little Englanders and calls them racists because they wanted to have Brexit and because they wanted to talk about what immigration is not just doing to their economic prospects, but also doing to their cultural sense of self. Why would working class communities want to vote for such a party? Thirdly, why do you think that working class communities are so stupid that we cannot see that socialism is a debunked political economic system? It doesn't work in Cuba. It doesn't work in Venezuela. It didn't work in Romania. It didn't work in Poland. It didn't work in Russia. It didn't work in Hungary. It didn't work in Yugoslavia. It hasn't worked anywhere it has been tried. It hasn't worked in North Korea. It hasn't worked in Vietnam. It hasn't worked in China. And yet, despite all the evidence, here you are selling to us socialism. It is dead. It is dead. And it doesn't speak to people. The working class communities that you think that you are speaking to, they existed in the 1950s. They existed in the 1960s. They existed in the 1970s, but they don't exist today. They don't exist right now. The working class communities of the north of England are no longer Marxist. They don't believe in your Marxist conflict of class. They believe in an identity that is national. That same national identity that you spit on week after week, month after month, year after year.
I don't agree with you.
You can come back to me in a minute. Also, why would we want to vote for a bunch of donkeys who simply virtue signal about the transgender issue or about the Black Lives Matter issue when you turned a blind eye to the systematic raping of tens of thousands of working class girls by Muslim grooming gangs because you wanted to sound politically correct? And it is still going on. Labour, this is the voice of the working class North, and this is why we won't vote for you. Until you can speak into these issues, the working class North will go somewhere else. What happened at this last election is that UKIP, a socially conservative party, stole your votes, and then when they lost their raison d'etre, those UKIP voters went to the Conservatives, and that is how you lost the North. But here's a message to the Conservatives. Don't think that your vote is guaranteed either, because we can get rid of you just like we got rid of the Labour Party, just like we are getting rid of the Labour Party. We don't need the Labour Party and we don't need you, because there is a new politicalisation of the working class in the north of England, and it is rooted in a national identity, in a cultural conservatism. And frankly, Conservative Party, you served us for Brexit, but you served the cultural Marxists on questions of culture. So, what can the Labour Party do? how can the Labour Party reconnect with northern working class voters like me? One, drop all your namby-pamby, progressive, virtue signalling bullshit. It doesn't speak to us. We want you to talk about culturally conservative issues, the importance of the family, the importance of national identity, the importance of our Christian heritage. You need a Christian socialism, not a Marxist socialism. You need a Christian socialism like that practiced by Tony Blair. He was the last person that won you election after election after election. And why did he do it? Because he wasn't a Marxist. Now granted, his victory was before the emergence of cultural conservatism in the North. Listen to me, every political party. The reality is that at a cultural level, the working class is moving conservative. Not the conservative of the Conservative Party, but the conservative of the traditional values rejected by the Conservative Party. And it was for that reason that middle class, wealthy Conservatives started to abandon the Conservative Party because they were culturally conservative. The party that gets these two things correct, of cultural conservative and of the idea of balancing out the differences in infrastructure and investment between the north of England and the south of England, will be the party that holds the north of England politically. Any questions? Or shall I move on to my next topic? Going once? Any questions? Going twice? Any questions? Okay, no more questions. I'll move on to my next topic. So, right now, in British politics, we have seen the demonstration of the power of democracy. Crucial questions that have led other countries to civil war are being dealt with democratically in the UK through the ballot box, particularly the question of Scottish independence. We should be grateful for that fact and never underestimate how powerful the idea of democracy is for saving societies from war. And it demonstrates the superiority of Western liberal ideas to those of totalitarian caliphates in the Islamic world. Don't feed the troll, JC. Don't feed the troll, JC. Don't feed the troll, JC. Just puts me off, JC. So, the union of the United Kingdom was the establishment of two crowns, the crown of Scotland and the crown of England, at the death of Queen Elizabeth, when James VI of Scotland became James I of the United Kingdom. That project is dying in the UK, and it is dying because of the fruits of 60 years of progressive, liberal, cultural Marxism. 60 years of not teaching children to be proud of their national identity. 60 years of not teaching common values. 60 years of not teaching common doctrines. 60 years of not teaching the idea of a common national project. And that is why right now you have the Conservatives dominating in England, Labour dominating in Wales, and the SNP dominating in Scotland. This union is an idea. It is a belief in the idea of a united kingdom. But a kingdom cannot be united if it is divided by its beliefs, its values, and its national agenda. And that is what 60 years of liberalism has brought to the United Kingdom. A lack of a joined up British identity. No. Christians take note of the failure and the failures of the United Kingdom, because the church can go the same way. Your fellowships can go the same way. So how can we help to strengthen the union? One, from north to south, from east to west, the United Kingdom must rediscover the idea of a singular national project and a singular national identity that is British, not English, British, not Scottish, British, not Irish, not Welsh. It must be based on shared British values. It must be shared on British ideas and the idea of a British identity in the world. And that cannot be done. That cannot be done without the idea. I'm going to step this way. That cannot be done without the idea of the discovery of the roots of British identity that are rooted in the church. Because you can't establish a British identity if you separate it from Christian history. You simply don't have the existential resources to construct a British identity separate from Christianity. So that's number one, and caveat to number one, number two. However, we also must establish an alternative voting system in England, because the SNP is riding on a hate the Tory ticket. That's the secret of their success in Scotland. Hate the Tories, vote SNP. The way to do that is to change the first past the post system in the UK to a more pluralistic voting system that will weaken the Tories in England and create greater diversity in the Westminster Parliament that will greatly represent all four nations of the kingdom. And then the people of Scotland will not feel the need to vote for the SNP. No, I want to address all of you who say you are proud to be British. All of you civic nationalists, I speak to you directly. See how fragile your national identity is. See how fragile your national project is. Your national identity is but a whisper. It was born of the trauma of a Christian civil war called the Christian Reformation. Christian identity has survived empires, caliphates, barbarian invasions, the ideas of communism and nationalism. They're all fleeting, transient dreams. But the Church of Christ is still here. The Church of Christ was triumphant when Rome fell. The Church of Christ was triumphant when the barbarian kingdoms stood. The Church of Christ was triumphant in the face of the Islamic caliphates. The Church of Christ survived when those caliphates fell. The Church of Christ was here when the nation states replaced the kingdoms and the empires of the medieval world. The Church of Christ has been here in every nation like Yugoslavia that collapsed. Every ideological construct like the USSR that collapsed. But the Church of Christ has been triumphant in all of those places. And when your beloved United Kingdom is a footnote in history, when your beloved European Union is a footnote of history, the Church of Christ will still be here. The Church of Christ will be triumphant. So think now, all of those who have given themselves to this idea of the United Kingdom in history, all of their projects, all of their initiatives, all of their efforts are on the precipice of being chucked in the bin. But consider the contributions of the saints who have built the Church of Christ. Their contributions still stand.